Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the CASA podcast. The CASA podcast is a talk show hosted by the Chinese American Students Association at the University of Pittsburgh, where I invite Asian Americans of all different kinds of backgrounds to talk about their upbringing, their current lives, and salient social issues facing our communities. I'm your host, Edward Lin, and tonight we have a Pittsburgh-based, Shanghai-sourced creative and entrepreneur, Charles Wang.
Hello, yep, I'm Charles.
So
Too
many of you
generous.
guys may already know Charles, but for those who don't, Charles, why don't you tell us what you do?
Okay, yeah, so I'm Charles. I run a fashion label called White Porcelain Apparel. Recently, it's been moving into a direction that also incorporates music. So now we're a multimedia fashion collective. And our clothing is supposed to embody kind of a platform for different creatives from various different disciplines to collaborate with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And I threw a runway show actually a couple months ago. Actually, Edward is very, very well aware that I threw a runway show.
Yeah.
He modeled for it.
Yeah, actually, I did a brief stint, I guess you could call it, in modeling then. So, yeah, why don't you tell us exactly how White Porcelain got started?
So White Porcelain was actually under a different name about over a little bit of a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually called Indescript. And so Indescript is actually a homonym of the word Indus script, two words from the Indus Valley.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, it's a homonym for it. And the reason why I wanted that was because Indus script is one of the first languages to ever appear in the Asian continent,
Uh-huh.
and would later influence a lot of East Asian languages like Chinese, Mandarin, Japanese,
Mm-hmm.
Korean before they changed the whole system, and a lot of Southeast Asian languages as well.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, and so the reason behind that is because I wanted it to encompass a lot of different Asian heritage and be like a common focal point where a lot of different Asian cultures can kind of unite.
Oh, that's really
So
cool.
that was called Indescript.
Uh-huh.
And then I realized that as I was making the designs and clothes, I wanted to change it to a different name and almost
Mhm.
a different theme as well.
Mhm.
One, because I put Indescript and screen printed it on clothes and just looked ugly.
I see.
White Porcelain, in my opinion, looks a lot better than Indescript.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I wanted to focus more on the now than the before. I didn't really want to have the foundation of my brand be based in the past, but I rather wanted to have it kind of lay its groundwork in the contemporary,
Mm.
So I changed the name to White Porcelain, and the reason why it's called White Porcelain now is because porcelain, for the most part, is white, and it's called White Porcelain, which is kind of redundant because I wanted to be a canvas for different artists to kind of paint their art on.
Oh, that's really
and
cool.
Collaborate with one another.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like how, you just went right into talking about, the themes. I was actually going to ask about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was interested in Indescript because, historically speaking, most of the Asian continent has been pretty culturally fragmented. What gave you this idea of having a place where we could bring everyone together?
Honestly, it's because growing up, I've been exposed to so many different Asian cultures.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up Chinese, so obviously I had a lot of Chinese food growing up. I'm okay at Chinese speaking it. I could understand it, but not too good at writing it.
Yeah.
But as a kid, I watched a lot of anime.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the big three. It was Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece.
Oh, wow.
I still keep
Yeah.
up with Naruto. It's called Boruto now or something.
Yeah. Actually, I read all of Naruto when I was in just starting high school. I actually read all of Bleach too. So.
Wait. All of Bleach?
Yeah, all of Bleach. I finished the whole thing.
All right. What do you think about the ending?
It's kind of okay. I
Kinda
mean, yeah, it's kind of average if you ask me. Yeah. Why? Do you have a strong opinion towards it?
I have a very strong opinion. I did not think it was good.
Oh, really? Why is that?
It was. Oh my god. Okay, so there's actually a reason why it wasn't good. So it's not just my subjective opinion, but I think they
Really?
should have
Okay.
ended it around the Eisen arc because I thought
Okay.
that was super good.
Yeah, that was a really funny arc, or not funny, but a fun arc to read. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, yeah, it was definitely funny.
Yeah, I don't know about funny.
Yeah, no. It was because the artist, the manga writer,
Yeah.
Tight Kubo, I believe his name
Mhm.
was. He was sick or something and was really rushed by Shonen Jump to finish the manga in a lot shorter of a time span than he wanted to.
I see.
So the ending was kind of rushed, which was okay-ish because then you get to see everyone's bankai come out in every 2 chapters.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, I think there's a sense of delayed gratification being better there.
Yeah.
I feel like if we had waited, maybe there would have been more creativity flowing.
More development as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, back to the point. So yeah, growing up, I was Chinese. I watched a lot of anime,
Mm-hmm.
and then in more recent years, I've been um, experimenting with a lot of K-pop and like K-rap,
Interesting.
um,
Yeah.
and that's really inspired me to like actually like convert WPA or White Porcelain into a music record label as well. Just because
Interesting.
I'm really into that type of music as well, like more R&B, chill.
Mm-hmm.
I don't just listen to Korean music, but that kind of inspired me to realize that there's so many different Asian cultures. Like, yet there's still kind of a racism between us, and I kind of wanted to break that boundary between different people.
Interesting, yeah. And now that you mentioned that kind of like subtle racism,
Mm.
that's been something that I've actually touched on in a couple of past episodes as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if we want to elaborate on that, what do you think is the biggest issue, in that regard, facing like the mindsets of Asian Americans in our current, I guess, political era?
So you're asking about two Asians or like between Asians?
Between Asians.
Between Asians. So I think there's a really big racial divider between Asian Americans and
Mm-hmm.
FOBs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, at least when I grew up in Cupertino, because that's my background, I grew up in Cupertino until I was in 8th grade before I moved to Shanghai.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in Cupertino, I realized that a lot of my friends didn't want to associate themselves, Asian friends, Asian American friends, ones who were ABCs, born and raised in America.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't really want to associate themselves with the FOBs, the people who grew up in China for most of their life and came to America, usually in pursuit of a better education, and usually sometimes without their parents. So I thought that kind of sucked for the FOBs because they are already in kind of unfortunate circumstances,
Yeah.
not being next to family, growing up in a city, in a school where they're not very familiar with the language, and they have to do everything in that language, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's definitely like a racial divider between those two.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want, like, people didn't want to wear like FOB clothes. Even now, that's still kind of a thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
Um,
you see it a lot.
Yeah,
With,
yeah,
like, especially people who are more like kind of in tune with fashion.
yeah.
Like there are certain brands that are just like an absolute no-no. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Especially
I
if
know.
especially if you already, look very Asian, as both of us do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I absolutely look like a FOB. um, but yeah, I like live up to it. I lived in Shanghai for a long time. I really like how FOBs dress, actually, which is
Yeah.
funny because a lot of that kind of gets inspired into White Porcelain.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to make it available to all people of all types.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, sometimes I go shopping with people and they're like, "Oh, do I look too fobby in this?" I'm like, "What's wrong with looking fobby?"
Yeah, yeah. I completely agree with you on that. Like, the whole point is that like you're supposed to bridge those kinds of gaps, right? And
Yeah.
clothing is a great way to do it. But when, we as Chinese Americans are actively supporting the creation of this divide by saying, do I look too fobby or like
Yeah.
stuff like that, it really is kind of counterintuitive to the whole, unity idea. And a lot of times it's even just like subconscious and we play it off like it's no big deal. But what do you think about, the effect that it has on our communities? Do you think it's, something as small as clothing? Do you really think that, that has as wide-reaching implications as we're kind of saying that it does?
I think back then, when communities of FOBs were a lot smaller than they are now, it might have mattered more. But now, obviously, I want this divide to like go away and erode itself away. As both the communities grow larger, I think the boundary is going to slowly erode and just combine into one eventually. Of course, there'll still be like subgroups and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, like as I was saying, I think back then, or even just like 10 years ago, it would have mattered more to be a FOB and like the kind of subtle racism between them two,
Yeah.
because groups were smaller and there were less of a support group. But now I think it's like better because there's so many more FOBs around, I guess, or people who grew up in China. They have a lot more of a support group to rely on, whereas before I feel like they'd be kind of ostracized.
Yeah, definitely.
That being said, I think in the media now, you see a lot of Asian artists becoming cooler in the American mainstream. So you see like K-pop,
Yeah, definitely.
BTS like sells out all their concerts, and I know that they have to actually open up new venues in America just to like
Yeah.
have more people, and they call themselves the army. And it's really funny because sometimes I go there's almost like a fetishization, and that's like a whole nother topic of like
oh yeah,
Asian men.
dude, I have really strong feelings for that one.
Yeah, but that's like coming up, and I think before like never happened.
Mhm.
Basically, Asian men are like kind of becoming cooler in the
Yeah.
American mainstream. Like
Yeah.
you see like Crazy Rich Asians, you see like Searching from that one Asian actor.
Mhm.
I think that was like one of the first like big hits that starred like an Asian actor
Yeah.
as the main protagonist.
Yeah, instead of just some like, nerdy guy who sits in the back of the class and that kind of thing.
Does
yeah.
the bully's homework. And
Right, exactly.
yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I think that representing that is important to a degree, but it's really been overblown and it's turned into this stereotype. You know what I mean? And I really don't think that that's appropriate. But at the same time, if we're going to continue to portray Asian men as just macho and cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that might just turn that into another stereotype? And then one day, you know what I mean? Like one day, because
pick your poison kind of
yeah,
thing?
exactly. Because historically speaking, actually, this model minority idea actually wasn't the original sentiment towards Asians in America. Originally speaking, we were treated like the new Irish immigrants way back in the day. Actually, like America thought of us as kind of a plague, that we were unruly and like we would, just cause a ruckus. But then all of a sudden, right, we after World War II ended and this whole thing with the Japanese ended, there was another change of plans, right? Because now we had America and the Soviet Union as two global superpowers. America was really afraid that China was going to join forces with the communist. I mean, well, they eventually did, but at the time it was still a fear, and out of fear, America created this new propaganda scheme. That now we have a model minority, that Chinese are doing everything the best out of all the minorities, and then this kind of myth propagated, and eventually there's with those kinds of like blatant lies, there's always a backlash, and I think that's what turned into this whole like Asians are nerds, or Asians are just like head in our math homework all the time, or things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned that was a blatant lie, but I don't think it's like entirely a lie. I do think culture plays a big role in it.
Okay.
I think the Chinese culture makes us naturally gravitate towards academics more than it does like other things that you might do in school, like sports, or even like the kids that don't really care about school. I think our culture makes it so that we're really focused on the future.
Okay.
And the future usually thinking about the future usually entails, studying harder, working harder, going into fields that are usually money making and safer, and that usually is engineering or math. I think that's why a lot of students do choose to do that.
Yeah.
That being said, I think there was like a study that I was reading about how like the reason why Asians usually tend to do better in school is not because they're just like good at math, but rather because they tend to make study groups more than any other demographic of people.
Really?
Yeah. So that's
I had never actually heard of that.
And another reason, okay, so like I mentioned that Asians are not necessarily good at math, but there's actually science about studies saying that having character languages like Chinese, like how there's characters in it, pictographic languages, this is what I think they called it, versus languages like English where it's just an alphabet, tend to do better with spatial thinking. Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, it makes intuitive
sense.
sense.
I mean, if you've grown up all your life thinking spatially about how you even like write something that's so integral to life, I guess it would make sense that it becomes second nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that makes people tend to like think more mathematically. And also in Chinese, I don't know about you, but like I'm okay at Chinese, but whenever I do math, I usually do in my head in Chinese.
Oh, of course. Same. It's just so much faster.
It's so much faster. Yeah. There's so many less syllables, like 11, 3 syllables. Chinese like 11, or even just like 1 to 9. It's all one syllable, but sometimes in English it's like 1 or 2 or 3. 6, 7. Oh no, it's okay. But like once you get into the bigger digits,
once the larger digits hit, that's when the difference really begins to show.
Yeah,
definitely. I can see that. I was actually talking about that with a couple of my other friends too. It's like I believe there's a book written about all sorts of things like that, and I don't know, the name of that book escapes me. But I think it was called like The Misfits, or maybe something along those lines.
Is this by like Malcolm Gladwell or something?
I don't know. I'm not quite sure, but it was a book that was just all about the different like cultures
I
and
think
the
this is manga.
impacts
Yeah.
that they had on, you know, the way that we think, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is kind of like going off on a tangent, but I actually found this really interesting. There's languages where they have like a bunch of different words for the color blue, and then there's other languages where, well, what we would call blue, they have a
Yeah.
bunch of different differentiating colors
For blue.
for blue, right?
Okay.
Because blue is a very naturally occurring color. But
Mhm.
then like there's another color that really doesn't naturally occur too often,
Right.
and they just don't have a word for some color, right? And then when
Right.
you ask them, you know, what, and you show them that color, what color is it? They actually just merge it with another color. Like it's almost as if they don't see that color.
Uh,
But we do the same for the color that other cultures diverge into, a bunch of different cultures, and they look at those
Mhm.
colors and they're like, dude, that's not, those colors are not similar in any way, shape, or form,
Right.
But we would blanket them all in blue.
Right.
Yeah.
Y-
So
yeah.
I just thought that was something that was really interesting and, you know, kind of related to what we were talking about.
Yeah, no, it's like a lot of small things play a much bigger role later on in your life, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So I mean, we talked a lot about the meaning behind your name, White Porcelain Apparel,
Yeah.
and you know how the kind of evolution that it went through. So what kind of aesthetic really were you going for with all of your clothing in white porcelain?
So the aesthetic is mostly grayscale. So that's like your blacks, your whites, your grays.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we have a pop of color. Usually it'd be like more of a neon color, like a
Mhm.
yellow neon or like an orange neon.
Mm-hmm.
Done tastefully, of course, is
Yeah,
the goal.
absolutely.
And that was like a whole other story, just like the development of design for white porcelain.
Yeah,
So I can delve into that a little bit later.
sure.
But as for like the actual design, yeah, so the colors are grayscale with a pop of either neon yellow, neon orange, or some other colors.
Mm-hmm.
If we're collaborating with another either artist or clothing brand, of course we consider their colors as well.
Mm-hmm.
As for the fits, they're usually pretty baggy, pretty oversized.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty hip these days.
Yeah.
But we like to play with a lot of different fabrics. So sometimes we use some like polyester, waterproof fabrics like nylon. Sometimes we use more of a weaved material for like grandma sweaters.
Mhm.
Sometimes we use like nylon for bomber jackets. We use denim. We of course use cotton and all sorts of blends of cotton. It's actually really interesting. So I went to Guangdong
Mhm.
this winter break to check out my manufacturers, and he took me across the fabric market. It was the
Yeah.
largest in the world.
Oh wow, that's
It was
really
huge.
cool.
We spent like a whole day just to get through a fourth of it.
Wow.
Yeah, but they do everything there, and so we actually found the same fabrics that Balenciaga uses.
Really?
So our next sweater, yo, watch out.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
then if that's the case, that you know, like in Guangdong they have this whole fabrics market, and you were able to find high quality for what
Mhm.
I'm assuming is like a relatively lower cost, right?
Oh, it's pretty expensive.
Oh, it is.
It's not cheap.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
So I guess that really explains why a lot of American brands are using Gildan prints all the time instead of
Oh yeah.
you know sourcing it from elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's like for those brands, usually they have to start somewhere, and
Right.
usually people like those don't have a lot of money to start, so they
Mhm.
usually start printing on Gildan, get a following that way. But
Mm,
I
I
had the
see.
fortune to like go to, because my family's from China, right? So I was
Mhm.
visiting China anyways, and it's like a $100 flight to go to Guangdong from China for
Wow.
Shanghai. So like,
Yeah.
of course I had to go.
Yeah.
And oh man, okay, so when I went to Guangdong to check out my manufacturers,
Mm-hmm.
I actually have 2 manufacturers there
Interesting.
that I
Yeah.
keep regular contact with and have done bulk orders with.
Mm-hmm.
And so they never knew that I had multiple manufacturers in Guangdong.
Oh.
And so I told them about it because they asked me, "Do you have other manufacturers here?" And I didn't want to lie, so I was like, "Oh, yeah, yes." And
Apprehensively, of
yeah,
course, right?
apprehensively, of course. And so they were like, I've never felt like a girl in my life. Like they
Really?
treated me to every meal. They just try to one up each other to get the other person's
really?
business. The only meal, and I was with a friend, and he
Uh-huh.
could attest to this. The only meal we bought the whole 3-day trip was my first breakfast there.
Incredible.
After that, they paid for literally everything. And one of the people, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on this podcast, but they like took me to like bars and clubs.
Oh yeah. Go
Okay.
ahead.
They took me to like bars and clubs and like got us tables.
Oh wow.
And
That's
paid for
crazy.
paid for everything. And
And how big are these manufacturers?
one of them significantly larger than the other.
And yet both of them were competing for your business through this kind of I don't want to call it this, but it's like borderline bribery kind of
Borderline
way.
bribery, yeah. I think it's just how they do business down there. But it was
Mhm.
crazy because like at these clubs, they had like menus that were like the person was like the 大老板, so
Mhm.
the big manager there was like,
Yeah.
oh, order whatever you want. And I looked
Incredible.
at the menu,
Wow.
and the cheapest thing was like 1,600 RMB, which is roughly 200 USD,
That's
approximately
insane.
220 USD. Yeah,
And what was it?
it was like all sorts of alcohol.
Oh, okay. So even just like the cheapest thing they can offer is around.
was around $200 for a handle.
So this wasn't just any like I don't know like regular old nightclub.
No.
This was high end. This is like where
It was crazy.
the big shots go.
It was definitely crazy because
Yeah.
like it was like a Wednesday night, Thursday
Oh,
night,
really?
and it was like packed.
Really?
And it was, yeah.
I mean, one can hardly imagine what it would look like when it's peak season.
Yeah, everyone's wearing suits and stuff, and it's like, what is
Really?
this place? Yeah.
Wow. So that's even more high class then. It's not like
Mhm.
it's not just where everyone's kind of going wild. Everyone's like dressed up and prim and
People are
proper.
a little bit older than me, is the average age, I would say.
Really? Even older than you?
Not by much, but like
Not by much. Okay.
because a lot of people in Guangdong make their money at a younger age.
I see.
Like
So it's a
people
lot
who-
of nouveau riche then?
Yeah, a lot of like newer wealth and newer rich people. Some of them, the big manager at one of the factories never even had a college education. He just kind of
Really?
jumped straight
Wow.
into it, and then he just kind of rose the ranks, and now he's like, oh my god, so it's so funny. So when he went to pick me up, right?
Uh-huh.
Because they just like drive me around.
Yeah.
So when they picked me up from the hotel that I stayed at, he picked me up in a Porsche, right? And I'm like, oh shoot, nice car.
Yeah.
I like complimented everything. He's like, oh yeah. And he's like, thank you. And then later when he picked me up to go to like the bars and clubs, he picked me up in another Porsche. And I'm like, wait a second, am I just tripping, or is this the same? Is this a different Porsche? He's like, yeah, this is one of my two Porsches. I'm like, oh my god, this guy's so stacked.
Yeah.
He had like a rollie on and everything. Oh,
Wow,
this
that's
guy's, like,
incredible.
mad
And
money.
and that's just like not even a college education. He just jumped right in
Yeah,
and started this whole thing up from scratch.
from scratch.
Incredible.
Crazy.
Wow. I mean, we talk about America being the land of opportunity. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, really, that is something else. Now, obviously, I don't want to discount the fact that the population of China
It's
is
huge.
like huge. It's literally a third of the world's population, right?
Yeah.
And out of all of those people, success stories might be few and far in between. But if you make it big in China,
You make it big.
you really do make it big. You're serving a third of the world and your income is coming from a third of the world.
More or less, yeah. It was actually
Yeah.
really interesting. So before I went to Guangdong,
Mm-hmm.
I was actually doing investor pitches in a province called Huzhou,
Okay.
which is about a 2-hour drive from Shanghai.
I see. And is that a tier 2 city?
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
It's like the government's really been trying to like ramp it up
I see.
because there's a lot of ports there as well, and it's a good trade city.
Okay.
So the government's like personally invested in trying to get a lot of like trying to brain drain other cities, or
Really?
yeah, they're trying to get like other wealth. Like they basically sponsor these government officials to headhunt people from other cities to come and work in this province, whether it's
Interesting.
for whatever industry.
And is that targeted towards larger cities, or is it towards like more of the smaller provinces where you
Larger
might have
cities.
like okay, so
Larger cities.
they're trying to redirect like I don't know, whatever kind of creative power
Yeah.
from like places like Beijing or Shanghai
Yeah.
and move it into these smaller cities.
Yes.
That's really cool. That's a concept that I've never really heard of.
That's something that the Chinese government's trying to do. And they also do it with foreign Chinese people as well. So like there's this program called 千年计划. I think it's like the 1,000 person
Yeah, the
plan.
1,000-year plan or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. 千年 or yeah, 1,000 year 千人, it's 千人计划. So 1,000 people plan, and what they
Oh,
do
okay.
is a lot of Chinese people left the country to study overseas, right?
Yeah,
And they
yeah.
kind of stayed in America.
Yeah.
My dad included, and
my,
a bunch of
my
other.
parents included.
Yeah, so like they went overseas to get presumably what is a better education.
Yeah.
And so the government and the Chinese government realizes this, and what they're trying to do is they give these big incentives for these people to
Mhm.
come back to China
Yeah.
and work in China.
Mm-hmm.
So you get they give you stipends, and they also like
Interesting.
I don't think they give you lump sum money, but they do help
Okay.
you like pay for your housing, pay for your children's education,
Wow.
give you better benefits, and they give you like vacations and stuff like that. So that's like a thing that I know. Anyways, yeah, in Huzhou, I was doing some investor pitches, and what brought this up was because you talk about all these self-made men.
Yeah.
These people like that, I was like pitching, they're like mad and like rich, and they're all like super self-made. One of them
Really?
was actually Xi Jinping's personal guard. like 10 years ago.
You're insane.
Yeah, not 10, like 5 years ago or something. Yeah, he used to literally be in the, I don't know how to translate it into English, but like the highest personal guard,
Yeah.
and he would be in like the same room as Xi Jinping. And now he left and went to start a children's clothing company.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So
Yeah.
so he went from like a high governmental position
Yeah.
and he just left and he started a children's clothing company.
Yep.
And that sounds like a very interesting. I don't know. I feel like there was a gap in logic there. Did you have a chance to maybe like talk to him a little more about how he like rose to through the ranks or anything like that?
No.
Oh,
All I
okay.
know is that he's super like dapper looking. Like his hair's all slicked back,
Right,
with a
right.
slightly receding hairline, and he walks like a plank, like
Oh, really? Yeah,
he's,
like
super stiff,
perfect posture and all
like
that.
perfect posture.
Well, that would make sense.
And even when he's sitting down, he's like perfect posture, very
Mm.
intimidating to talk to. But yeah, no, he's like dressed in like this glossy like red suit with like
Oh.
little sparkles on it. And it's like so funny.
You know what that reminds me of though? That reminds me kind of like American fashion back in like the 20s, just being extra flashy.
Yeah.
And, like just making sure that everybody, like when you walk into a room, you want people to know,
people
right?
know you walk into
Yeah,
that room.
yeah, but things have changed for us, and I've always kind of felt like the technological and like social development of China
Yeah.
has been really closely mirroring what I guess you could just call the West, because it's not really centralized on America, but
Right.
it's happening at this like really alarming rate where like 10 years
Yeah.
of American culture and history is like condensed into 1 year of Chinese culture. And that's I mean, I know there's some people that are alarmed by that
Yeah.
and are like afraid that China's going to be the next superpower or something.
Yeah.
But what's your stance on the growth of China and it's kind of like catapulting itself into this new age of development?
I mean, when you say like condensed,
Mhm.
I don't 100% agree with that. I think they more skip
Skip.
around.
Okay.
For example, America went through this whole credit loaning phase,
Oh yeah.
after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And China has never really gone through that phase. They kind of jumped straight from cash and a little bit of credit card into straight WeChat.
Oh, that's right.
WeChat.
Yeah.
Like they
And
just do everything
I
through WeChat.
remember I went back in 2008,
Yeah.
right? And then I went back again around like 2000, I believe it was like 14. But then this past summer, I went
Yeah.
back again and it was just everyone's on their phone paying with their phone. And just 2-3 years beforehand, it was all
Yeah.
cash.
There's
Yeah.
some places that don't accept cash anymore.
Really?
Yeah,
And
I
it's
was
just
kinda
pure
shocked.
Alipay.
Yeah, some taxi drivers that are super sus.
Uh-huh.
I think they're trying to put money on like in their own pockets.
Uh-huh.
They use WeChat. They're like, "Oh, I don't accept cash. Just give me WeChat."
Really? And
Something
how
crazy.
does that scam work?
I have no idea. But
Really?
They're just like, it's kind of sus that they don't accept cash or the Metro card, but only WeChat.
Oh.
And-
Do Metro cards usually work with taxis?
They have to legally. They're obligated to. But sometimes China is China.
Yeah, that's true. China is China. And, saying that kind of is tinged with this kind of, I don't know, a little bit of bitterness towards a lack of regulation on their
Yeah.
part. But honestly speaking, like,
But it's grounded in truth.
yeah, it really is. And,
Yeah.
do your parents talk to you about that at all? Like, seeing that,
About WeChat or about the
your
regulations.
no, about like putting your business manufacturing headquarters and stuff like that in China, like
Oh.
and seeing that you have to make regular visits. What I would assume for
Yeah.
the future, regular visits.
Yeah.
Do they ever warn you about like how dangerous it?
Okay, this is so funny. The Guangdong place I visited was called
Uh-huh.
Dongguan. And for the
Okay.
people who are from China,
Yeah.
they know that Dongguan is the prostitution capital of China.
Oh my goodness.
It's changed in recent years,
Okay.
but I definitely saw that in Dongguan when I was
That's scary.
there. I was like, wow, I'm not about that life, but man, I was like offered, and these people were like stunning, like models. So I was like shocked.
Are you serious?
It was actually crazy. Yeah.
Well, that's insane because like generally speaking, when you talk about like prostitution, that's like the image that you have isn't really like people who are like 10 out of 10 and just offering
No, these
themselves
people
up
are
like
like
that.
actually models.
That's at the same time that's kind of like wow, but really wow in a disturbing way.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like wow question mark.
Yeah.
And do you have any idea why there isn't any crackdown on that?
Oh no, they're okay. I said in recent years it's been a lot better.
Oh, okay, and that's
Yeah. So
because of the crackdown.
because of the
crackdown?
government cracking down on it, and
I
I
see.
think the reason why it's been so big there is because it's near Shenzhen, which is next to
Oh,
Hong Kong, and I
yeah,
think before like a lot of foreigners would like come and like indulge a little bit.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So it really
Unfortunately,
does have rootings in like. I guess it really does all go back to imperialism, doesn't it?
yeah, all goes back there. But I mean, that's the past.
Yeah,
Think about
the past
future.
is in the past. That's
Yeah.
true. That's actually really interesting to hear about. Do you have any other like big stories that you'd like to share? Coming back from Guangdong.
I felt better there because I think the average height in Guangdong is shorter
Oh,
than in Shanghai, so I felt like kind of tall
oh, well,
for
that's
once
nice.
in my life.
Yeah, that's really. I mean, congrats, but you're back now, so
Yeah, I came
reality
back.
can
All
hit
these
like a
people are
truck
like,
sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah,
woo, yeah,
yeah. I mean, even a lot of students I see are just
Mhm.
really, really ridiculously tall. And I'm not talking about like just average like American student. I'm talking about like, Chinese students.
yeah,
And
with the American diet.
right, exactly, with an American diet. And then all of a sudden they just shoot up like bamboo sprouts,
Yeah.
Like something in me makes me really wonder like what's up in China that, you know,
Mhm.
the diet there versus here is just like
I
such a difference.
Yeah, no, I just think people are just much more well fed in America.
Mhm.
But now people in China are starting to get taller too. I think just
Mhm.
generations before, people had it in the genes to grow taller,
Mhm.
but just the environment and some degree of malnutrition, or being underfed makes it so
Mhm.
that you don't grow to your full potential.
Yeah.
But now in China, my cousin, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
he's like a week younger than me,
Really?
and he's like a head taller than me. And his
Oh
parents are the same height
no.
as mine, and we're like close. We're like 1 degree cousins, right? So basically the same genes and everything. Just his dad is,
Oh, wow.
and I was like, wow. And the reason is because as a kid, this guy was like very large, like very horizontally.
Oh,
large.
horizontally large.
Very
Okay.
horizontally large, yeah. And he was like the same height as me for the longest time.
Interesting.
But like he just kept on eating and eating and eating. And like my grandma, he lived with my grandma too, in the same village. He's from one of the poorest cities in China.
Mm-hmm.
But like they just feed him like cartons of milk, and like
It really does take a village then. Yeah.
And then he just like all the meat on the table just gets like, you just lift the table and just like the kids on the other side just rolls into his
Yeah.
mouth.
Yeah.
This kid was eating everything. He was like a
Uh-huh.
trash can, just like everything he didn't want, just like stuff in this kid's mouth.
I mean, on one hand, that kind of sounds like torture, but on the other,
This kid enjoyed it.
gave results.
It
you
gave
know?
oh yeah, this kid is like like taller than anybody that anybody's ever seen in our whole like genetic line. So yeah, like
In the genealogy of the Wangs.
the genealogy of the Wangs, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's actually really funny to think about. But yeah, so let's go back to your role as the founder of White Porcelain. Then.
Okay.
You've created like some really novel and intriguing designs. I mean, I especially really like that one hoodie, the one that's Audible Ecstasy.
Okay.
I really like just the way that hoodie is, like the
Okay.
way that it's baggy, and also like the design on the back is really creative. The sound bite from that one song, I forget what exactly it was.
Okay. Yeah. So it's called Midsummer Madness. It's from 88 Rising.
Yeah, that's just really cool that you took like an audio bite and then like
Uh-huh.
even like recolored it and everything.
Yeah.
But have you ever run into a situation where you just couldn't come up with any new ideas?
Yes. Like,
Yes, really.
definitely with Indescript.
Mm-hmm.
Which is one of the reasons why I moved past White Porcelain. But yeah,
Mhm.
back when I was doing Indescript, the whole design process for that was a lot more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just wasn't 100% feeling it, which is why I changed it.
I see.
Now with White Porcelain, it's funny because I was never a graphic designer
Mhm.
for White Porcelain. I was never the designer, but I just had a design because I was in searching for a graphic designer for so long, right?
Okay.
And I searched for graphic designer for so long that I just kept making designs during this time that I kind of just became the graphic designer for White Porcelain.
Interesting.
So yeah, I like to think that my designs are getting better. The
Mhm.
hoodie was one of the earlier designs that I was like pretty okay with.
Mm.
But now in the future, I think the designs that are coming out are a lot more cool. I have this one design that's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
It uses one of the runway designs
Oh, interesting.
of the scarf. If you remember that.
Yeah, I do.
Basically, I went on the internet and just found a bunch of different portraits of a bunch of different girls from the 1920s jazz age in Shanghai. And they're usually like they're pinup girls basically.
Uh-huh.
They wear like a cheap hao, like a traditional Chinese
Yeah.
dress. And it's very vibrant colors. I found the internet. I found like 30 of these pictures, put them all in an array, graded out, black and white it. They made a scarf out of it, and then I'm making that print and moving it onto our new WPA logo onto the back of a sweater, and it's actually printed. So the process of it is it's the actual hoodie itself or the sweater itself is the same design or very similar measurements as the hoodie. So it's kind of baggier on the sides, droops a little bit on the arms, and so for the actual design itself, I'm taking the print of the scarf, printing it onto the nylon 3M material, and so when you put it into a light, it's reflective. And then I'm going to cut it out, the WPA logo, and then sew it onto the back of the sweater. So it's a lot of layers of fabrics, and that way, once like people are like in clubs or they're at night, they're gonna see the reflective material on the back, and they're gonna be like, "What is that material?" And they get closer, and it's like, "Oh, those are faces. Oh my God, those are like jazz girls' faces." And so that's kind of a design that's coming up.
I like that, and it's kind of like a a subtle marketing thing too. You know, you were saying like people will take it into clubs or people will take it here and there. You know, people are gonna ask questions.
Yeah.
And
where'd you get that?
Yeah, exactly. When the product looks good, you know, people will come to it, and that's really cool that you come up with these really good ideas. So how did you really get your creative juices flowing? Was it just really through like ages of practicing while you were looking for this, graphic designer that really never showed up?
So for me, I would say most of my creative juices come from looking at runway shows. They get inspired by a lot of music I listen to, and just whatever I'm feeling that day, and then just do sketches on a sketchbook, take a look at it. Oh, this is trash. Next page. And I have to go through a lot of trash to finally find the diamond in the rough. Yeah. And so when I made the runway show, oh man, I ran out of creative juice so much because I had to make like 12 outfits in a month. Because it was kind of just like I was talking to my co-founder Anthony, and I was like, "Anthony, I want to make a runway show." He's like, "You're crazy." I'm like, "No, I'm gonna do it."
And you did.
And I did
do it.
Yeah. So it was crazy. I got like 12 designs. 3 of them were already pre-made, so I had to make around 9 designs, and I went through so many iterations with samples from manufacturers. And I finally found like 9 I was comfortable with showing. And it like worked out. I was really happy about that. And on my runway show, I actually signed my first rapper to the record. Do
you want to tell us the story of how that happened?
Yeah. So I knew I have to go a little bit farther back then. So I knew a person named Coda.
Okay.
He goes to CMU, and I met him through. Oh, okay, yeah. So Anthony, the co-founder, was doing a business presentations class, and so he was approached by Coda. It's like, because Anthony was presenting White Porcelain, right? And Coda approached him. He was like, "Oh, I love your stuff, yada yada." And then we all met up together. And there was also the 88 Rising concert coming up, and we're like, "Let's go to the 88 Rising concert."
Wow. Yeah.
So we all went to the 88 Rising concert.
And how was that?
Oh, it was crazy. I loved it. I loved seeing Asian culture and Asian music becoming more mainstream.
Yeah, I really enjoy that too.
I got VIP tickets to High Brothers.
Really? No way.
Yeah, no, legit.
How did that happen?
I just like bought it with money.
You just straight up bought it with your own money?
Oh yeah, I just like saw. I'm like, I have to do it. I love High Brothers.
White Porcelain must be making bank.
Oh no, that was out of my own pocket.
Oh no! Wow. So
yeah,
that's some true dedication.
Yeah, and then so we went together, and then that's when Coda mentioned, I know this freshman rapper named Eddie Days. And he showed me his music, and I was like, this guy's perfect. And the reason why I loved him so much is because, his music. Yeah. So we can play his music later, but I loved his stuff that he already has. And the reason why I really think he has a lot of potential is because this guy's fob, really. He's from Seoul, but he has the most American voice. Like, when I first listened to his music, I did not think he was Korean until I saw him. I'm like, wow,
really?
You're Korean. And I think he's like the perfect blend of so many different things going on in America right now.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I mean, like the onset of, people who I never would have thought would be listening to like K-pop, and you know, they tell me, I'm like BTS's biggest fan, and then
Army.
Yeah. BTS Army. Yeah, that's really cool. And I actually have a couple of music clips from what did you say his name was?
Eddie Days.
Eddie Days. Okay. And why don't we take a couple of listens to that?
Hella sketchy.
Yeah. Want candy, now I want the pain. I'm talking ice cream chains with lemonade. I'm talking white for 88s, red Ferrari dreams. I'm talking about the green, I'm talking about the green. Used to want candy, now I want the fame. I'm talking ice cream chains with lemonade. They asking why you wanna change when it's all the same. It's 'cause of
All right, so just listening to this, I think, yeah, there's a lot of, I kind of feel like there's a, what's his face vibe going on here.
He's got a lot of vibes going on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that. But I really feel like there's a Juice World vibe. I don't know if
This
that's
song
just
has
me.
a little bit.
Yeah, yeah,
the
definitely.
beat and the way he does his melody. Yeah.
Yeah, and you were talking about the lyrics. I actually think the lyrics are pretty well made too. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of artists out there that I've like been approaching and like collaborating with.
Mhm.
And I want to talk about that later too.
Sure,
with
yeah.
Subtle Asian Traits
Absolutely.
and Asian Creative Network.
Yeah.
That's how I found a lot of people to collaborate with.
Really interesting.
Yeah. So I found a lot of lyrics, and I love the way how his lyrics are not like super upfront in your face.
Yeah, definitely.
Some people definitely are a little overbearing on that, and I really like how he's more tasteful with it.
Mhm.
At the same time, he's not like trying to create like a puzzle for people to like figure out.
Yeah, you won't be finding this on a Genius explain the lyrics video.
yeah, you don't. Yeah, exactly. So we don't need one of those. Although most of the lyrics videos that Genius has done explain the lyrics are already pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, I guess
It's
so.
like-
That's true.
The bitch in the club.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like, what does this mean? I'm like,
I wonder why. Actually, it's really about, social context.
Yeah.
How, you can find some really awful. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, so I like the lyrics for this. And another song that's coming out is called Intervention.
Oh,
It's
okay.
actually coming out tonight.
Oh.
Or tonight or tomorrow, depending on if we can like upload it on time and stuff.
Okay.
But that's like a song that I really like the lyrics to as well. It's a lot more verse rap heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we've been working on it. And if you listen to the lyrics, White Porcelain's in there.
Oh, really?
very,
Interesting.
very
So,
super subtly.
Very subtle name drop too.
Yeah,
I
very
like
subtle
that.
name drop.
Yeah, it's always really cool to see just an entire culture revolving around something. And you know what? Speaking of, why don't we listen to the intervention?
Been 6 months since I spit phlegm. Got a lot of shit to say, simply listen.
Yeah, so I mean, my first impression going into the song, I was like, okay, fine, you got some nice, beats going on down there, but then the lyrics start coming in, and he just goes
for it.
at it.
Me, Myself, and I.
Yeah, that's
only need like something Trinity.
that's really
Wow.
good. Yeah, I mean, wow, just listening to that sounds really cool. So what have you had a lot of opportunities to talk about, what inspires him to make this kind of music?
Yeah, we have some conversations, some soul talks every once in a while, but
that's
mostly he just like he's told me like he just listens to a lot of rap,
Mm-hmm.
and then he just like he's like, oh wow, no, that's not, I don't like necessarily agree with what that guy's saying, and then he just wanted to have to like spit some fire of his own, say some things
Mhm.
of his own,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when he started rapping. And this guy's been rapping since like he was like 15,
Wow.
like ish, yeah, 15-ish.
That explains a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
the audio sounds really well done. The mixing, just
Mhm.
everything just really does sound professional.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah, that's definitely really cool. So, yeah, Eddie Days, I mean, we're definitely going to be putting his stuff in the link of the video down below.
Yeah.
And if you guys are listening on Spreaker, you can go ahead and find him on SoundCloud at Eddie Days.
Yeah. I really like the song anyways, just because the whole song he's talking about how he's coming back from rapping. He's like,
okay.
6 months. Now I'm gonna like come back and like hit you guys hard, and he's got like a hit list and stuff. And
I see.
love
I
the
see.
lyrics,
That's
yeah.
funny. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So how does all of this music stuff really tie into just your vision for White Porcelain? Earlier, you said that you
Mhm.
wanted White Porcelain to be a canvas, right?
Yeah.
But I would imagine that you wouldn't really be putting like some bubbly, like K-pop song, or signing
Yeah,
anyone
yeah.
who does like country music. How
Yeah.
exactly does your music fit in with this brand image?
Yeah, so that's kind of been like a question that I've always been asking myself, especially in recent weeks when I realized that there's like a specific aesthetic and specific music type that I want White Porcelain to represent.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of goes against the whole I want this to be a collaborative platform for
Right.
everyone. So what's ending up happening is I'm just kind of developing almost like a talent agency. A lot of people are, like come to me and ask for producers. I'm like,
Interesting.
oh, so I like develop their talent as well. So
Uh-huh.
people of all types can come like to me and ask like for help, whether they're seeking recording studios or they're looking for a good mix and mastering for like my voice. They're looking for beats. They're looking for a rapper. They're looking for a female vocal. So people can all come to me and I'll like help them out. And I try to keep a long-term relationship with these people.
Yeah.
And through that, I'm able to foster their talent and then get
Wow.
people to collaborate with each other. So it doesn't necessarily have to be on our clothing or through our own record label,
Uh-huh.
but just anybody can come and we'll help you out.
Wow.
and
So
collaborate with each
really
other.
you're acting as like a connector for all different kinds of talent.
Yeah. So some people that like we've connected with actually is, so it's really funny. Tonight I'm actually gonna go to a recording studio that was Jimmy Wapo's old recording studio. And Jimmy Wapo's like huge. If you know who he is, he's like a Pittsburgh native rapper.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he died the same day as X, but he
Oh.
has like millions of views on his stuff. And we're gonna go to his recording studio and record Eddie. So that's
Wow. Yeah,
hey,
really living down the legacy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
straight
really,
up.
That's really cool.
But yeah, like also we have like producers from people who worked with like Snoop Dogg, with Major Lazer, DJ Mustard, Charlie
Wow.
Puth, people like those. So there's definitely connects there, of course. The goal is to really just develop talent first. Yeah.
And then I feel like, yeah, I agree with that. If you develop your talent, then people looking, people seeking that high level of performance are going to come to you and gravitate towards you automatically.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely really cool.
Really.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I think that's all the time that we actually have for today. Thank you so much, Charles, for joining us. It was really a pleasure to see that, we do have Asian American creatives, right here actually in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
That's definitely really cool. I hope you keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much for all of you wonderful listeners who are tuning in. We really do appreciate you guys. And a big thanks to WPTS for providing their studio and for airing us. The Chinese American Students Association at Pitt has a couple of big events coming up that we'd like to cordially invite you to. The Lunar New Year is coming up soon, and CASA, in partnership with the Vietnamese Students Association, would like to invite you to join us in the WPU Ballroom on February 9th. Sorry, could you cut that? The Lunar New Year announcement. 3, 2, 1. The Lunar New Year is coming up soon, and CASA, in partnership with the Vietnamese Students Association, would like to invite you to join us in the WPU Ballroom on February 9th for an evening of free food and cultural exhibitions, including a lion dance by Steel Dragon. Doors open at 5 p.m., and as always, you can keep an eye out on Facebook and Instagram for updates on Lunar New Year and other events at Pitt CASA. That's PITTCASA on Facebook and Instagram for updates. Well, that's all for tonight. Thank you once again for tuning in. This has been Edward Lin with our wonderful guest, Charles Wang from White Porcelain.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. And as always, CASA for life.